Welcome back to Story Time. Today we're talking about my first ever trip to go salmon fishing.
Oh baby. Oh baby.
Full disclosure, I have only been salmon fishing just this one time, so I don't know a ton about the biology of these fish, and I certainly don't know how to catch them. So bear with me. If you are an experienced salmon fisherman, please drop a comment below with some of the thoughts and perspectives throughout this video that you would like to share with the whole community. I'm trying to allow not only myself, selfishly, to become a better salmon fisherman someday, but I'd like the entire community to have a better idea of how to catch these fish and a little bit more about them. Now, my basic understanding of the biology of salmon, just like a big ocean, these Lake Michigan salmon will be on Lake Michigan for like 3 to 5 years. They'll come up the river, they'll spawn, and then they will die. And then the next fish will go out 3 to 5 years later when they're at maturity. They will come up the same river that they spawned in, and then they will spawn, and then they die. It's a cycle. They just keep going back and forth. Anyways, back to the story. I went fishing with 2 of my good buddies, Garrett and Adrian. None of us have a ton of salmon fishing experience. I know Adrian's caught a few, but overall we're pretty much all noobs. But we got to the river and there's quite a few people there. So we just basically had to pick a spot on the bank to fish, and we, waded in the river and we were chasing them around. I started out with a bead, which mimics an egg, and then they had some kind of little cloth type deal that also is supposed to mimic the spawn from the salmon. Basically, we just fish that with a big weight, drift it down, no bite, reel it in, drift it down, no bite, reel it in, so on and so forth. But as we fished, what was getting a little frustrating is the people all the way on our right and then the people all the way on our left were both catching fish. And not only were they catching fish, these fish were throttling them. They were running for 50 to 60 to 70 yards. It was crazy. I had never seen a fish fight so hard. And so we were just like, okay, well, this guy's on a river bend and this guy's on a river bend. It must be the river bends. We must need to go hit a river bend. So we explored and we tried to catch fish along the way. We looked and looked. So then we finally found this one spot where we kind of settled in and there was fish being caught there and we were seeing a lot of fish. So we figured, hey, this is a good spot. But again, even at this spot, I was fishing hardcore, seeing a ton of salmon, but I would not get any bites, not a single dang bite, and neither did Adrian or Garrett.
Oh man, there's 2 in my pool right in front of me. Just literally. Dude, I just want one to bite. Like, that's all I want. Just one freaking bite.
And eventually Adrian actually caught one. He basically was finishing out his drift. He went to reel up and the fish took off with it. He fought it like crazy, and then he caught it.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. She's a jumper. Oh gosh, I got a missile coming my way. Oh boy, keep her pressure.
But that fish wasn't hooked in the mouth, and it was not something that Adrian even knew was gonna happen. It was just kind of out of the blue. He reeled up, the fish ran into his hook, and he caught it unintentionally. That fish was turned loose and lived to fight another day. But then I was like, okay, that looked super fun. Adrian caught a huge fish. I was super jealous. I was like, okay, I gotta catch one of these things. But I just kept having zero luck, and I was looking to my left, people were hooking fish. I looked to my right, people hooking fish, and I wasn't paying that much attention to what was going on though. And I talked to Adrian, and he basically said, okay, well, watch these fishermen, Ethan. Like, I don't think you want to catch them that way.
How come these people like catch fish? Like that one dude's hooked multiple. What am I doing wrong? Well, the people, like that dude with the red rod, he's hooked up with like 5.
Yeah, watch out.
This guy, I'd watch him for a couple minutes. He'd cast it out, he'd drift it, and then he would just set the hook. And he would do that every single time. He would set the hook into thin air. But this dude had hooked like 8 different fish. And what I started to realize at that point is the fact that these people were not hooking these fish in the mouth, and these fish were not biting. Now here's where I want to bring up something that I've kind of learned in hindsight. Technically, it is legal to snag fish. It's flossing. You can basically line your line up with their mouth and set the hook. As long as you're hooking them on the outside of the mouth, by that technique, you are technically legally fishing. I'm not sure I 100% agree with that from an ethics standpoint, but it's not my call. If that person was flossing, that's completely fine. What was a problem for me is that while we were out there and I started to kind of realize what was going on, I noticed that there was basically 0 fish caught that day in the mouth. And I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody, you do your thing, but I'm a little bit confused by this whole situation, because if you're flossing them, you're supposed to hook them in the mouth. But if you're not flossing them, then you're just snagging. So there was a lot of people out there that were snagging, whether they were doing it intentionally or not. I think a lot of them were unfortunately intentionally snagging them. Whether that's the case or not, It's certainly not something that I was super pumped about. And like I said earlier, I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes. I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers. I just found this really weird. I'm from Kansas. We don't have salmon in Kansas. I never really knew this kind of stuff went on. But when they go up to spawn, these fish are really not aggressively feeding. It sounds like you can catch them in the mouth, but it sounds like it's also kind of rare when they get to this level. This was in a very small stretch of river. These fish were in the mode of spawning. They were not interested in eating. And so I started to realize that maybe that's not a style of fishing that I'm super interested in. There are types of salmon fishing before you get to that stage where they're gonna aggressively hit stuff, whether that be a crankbait, a spoon, whatever. That sounds interesting to me. And don't get me wrong, there's probably all sorts of people out there hooking fish in the mouth and doing this 100% ethically, and I'm all about that. I would love to experience more salmon fishing so that way I can learn more about that style of fishing. One comment that actually stood out to me big time was, there was a time, I didn't think much of it at the time, but then after, in hindsight, this really hits home. There was a guy that had just caught a fish and he was all pumped up, and then he said, "Oh, no way, this fish is actually hooked in the mouth. I gotta get a picture of that." And it's like, I mean, what did you expect? If you're fishing, aren't they supposed to be hooked in the mouth? I'm a little confused here. Regardless, I've been yapping about this for far too long. The point is, salmon fishing seems really interesting to me. I certainly want to try it again in the future, but this whole flossing thing or snagging thing, I'm not a huge fan of that, and I don't think that's a style of fishing that I have much interest in the future. I'm not judging anybody. If it's within rules, do it, but please just be careful and try to respect the fish when you're out there. That's my big thing. I'm a conservationist. I want future salmon for other anglers to enjoy, and I want our waters to be protected. It seems like there was a lot of trash on the ground in that particular river, and it was a beautiful river, and it's just kind of disappointing to see. So I don't know, this experience, it was just something that I didn't necessarily expect, but it is what it is, and it's certainly something that I will reflect on more in the future, and hopefully next time I go salmon fishing, I'll actually catch one. Okay, so if you also found this topic really interesting and want to learn more, check out that video right there. I found it on YouTube, and honestly, the guy just explains what flossing is versus a traditional drift fishing. What are your thoughts? Do you think that flossing's okay? Drop a comment below. I completely am not sure what to think about this at this point, and I want to know from other anglers just like you. Thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you next time.
Look what I caught. I caught a rock.